Sometimes the artist behind the work you admire the most could turn out to be the biggest villain in the entire industry. In every fandom, from music to film to online art communities, fans find themselves grappling with this reality. The furry fandom appears to be no different, and at the center of one of its ugliest scandals is an artist known as fiddleafox. Once a beloved creator whose art brought joy to thousands, she would become infamous almost overnight after leaked conversations exposed her racist and transphobic views. This video isn't just about one artist falling from grace. It's about the betrayal and hypocrisy of the artist. It's about how an internet community already struggling with its reputation was forced to reckon with its own in the worst possible time. fiddleafox's journey began on Tumblr with playful Ask blogs. She built a large following on Twitter, but all that came crashing down when screenshots revealed her most private, hateful thoughts. Her shocking first response didn't help either, as she bluntly admitted the racist messages were real and refused to apologize. But that's not all. We'll also see her bizarre Zootopia defense, the infamous shock collar explanation that left everyone who heard it in pure disbelief. When all is said and done, we'll see how this split the furry community, those who condemned her, those who bizarrely defended her, and those who saw an opportunity to profit off the chaos. This is the rise and fall of fiddleafox. Before the controversy, before the leaked messages and her downfall, fiddleafox was known first and foremost as an artist. Her story didn't begin in scandal, but in the same place where countless other creatives built their first followings, Tumblr. In the mid to late 2010s, Tumblr was a hub for niche fandoms and artistic communities, a place where daily sketches, daily comics, and interactive blogs could take on lives of their own. Among these was a collection of Ask blogs that allowed users to roleplay as characters and answer questions through art. fiddleafox, then going under different names, ran several of these, with one of the most popular being an Ask Licronoc blog. Fans would send in questions, and she would respond with playful, expressive drawings that gave personality and charm to Pokemon characters. For those who followed her work at the time, these blogs were an everyday delight. Many fans recalled checking back daily just to see what new doodle or joke she had posted. Her art was simple but lively, the kind of work that made the characters feel real and approachable. This style of engagement, which involved directly interacting with her audience, helped her stand out in a sea of artists competing for attention. As Tumblr began to wane in popularity and many creators migrated to other platforms, so did she. Rebranding under the name fiddleafox, she transitioned to Twitter, bringing along the audience she had cultivated on Tumblr while also reaching a broader furry community. By this point, her style had matured a lot. What had once been quick doodles evolved into polished illustrations and character art that fit seamlessly into the growing ecosystem of furry Twitter. Her following grew steadily, reaching over 35,000 followers at its peak. fiddleafox became a recognizable figure, one of those names you saw retweeted often, someone whose art circled widely enough to make her a staple of the timeline. For many fans, she was simply a talented artist they admired from afar. Her fox character, recurring sketches and commissions gave her a place in the fandom as someone who, while not at the very top, was at least well-known and well-liked. Her work was consumed for its cuteness, its creativity, and the comfort it brought to a community that thrived on self-expression. However, no one following her art could have predicted the storm that would come. You see, at this point, fiddleafox's identity was tied to her artwork, and her artwork was tied to her fans. This separation between the two didn't exist yet. To her audience, she was her art, and her art was her. That's what made the revelations to come all the more devastating. On July 22, 2021, the quiet image of fiddleafox as a beloved furry artist shattered. A burner Twitter account appeared with a single purpose: to expose her. Their first tweet came with a Google document attached. Its title blunt and unambiguous: fiddleafox is a hateful person. The document wasn't vague accusations or hearsay. It contained screenshots of Discord conversations attributed directly to fiddleafox, filled with racist, transphobic, and ableist remarks. These weren't offhand slips of the tongue or questionable jokes. They were raw statements of hatred written with conviction. The messages revealed her disdain for black people in the most explicit of terms. "Being around black people reminded me why Trump won," she wrote in one. "I hate black people," in another. She dismissed black voices online, claiming, Black people just want an excuse to cry and say every race is against them. Other comments mocked them as treating Popeyes like a kingdom, reducing an entire group of people to stereotypes. Most shockingly, one message read, "Black people need to wear shock collars or they'll fly into a murderous rage and rape your daughters." But the racism was only a part of it. The screenshots also showed contempt for trans people, with lines like, "I will always hate trans women more, but that could change if I subjected myself to trans men." She described trans women as failures at masculinity, claimed she was legitimately more afraid of trans women than men, and dismissed the trans rights movement outright as BS. These weren't jokes. They were repeated statements that painted a clear picture of her worldview. The call-out account framed these leaks not as petty drama, but as a duty to the community. The goal was to show that behind the polished Fox drawings and thousands of followers was someone actively spreading prejudice and hatred. To many, it felt like a betrayal. Here was an artist people had supported, commissioned, and celebrated, now revealed as someone openly harboring bigoted beliefs. The reaction for this was explosive. Some were in disbelief, struggling to reconcile the cute fox art with the venomous language in the screenshots. Others accepted it instantly, condemning her outright. One fan wrote, "One of the only big artists I actually followed is now dead to me. I love life." Fans who once proudly shared her work now deleted their retweets, distanced themselves, or posted their disgust. A longtime fan of hers tweeted saying, "I'm so hurt right now. I looked up to her art and sense of humor for months. She's legit one of my favorite artists I followed up until reading this document. I'm speechless. It really goes to show that you never know what's going on in someone's personal life. My stomach hurts so much." Yet even in the middle of the storm, a small subset of defenders emerged. They repeated a familiar refrain along the lines of, "Her art being so good, so I care." One of these supporters tweeted, "No, her art is adorable though." It was the same mindset that had surfaced in other scandals before, that perhaps the quality of the art could outweigh the flaws of the artist. But for many others, the line had been crossed. Racism wasn't to be overlooked. It was a moral failure that poisoned everything attached to them. The stage was set. The fandom waited for her to respond, to deny, to apologize, or to explain. No one could have predicted that when fiddleafox did respond, she wouldn't try to soften the blow or claim innocence. Instead, she would lean into the fire in a way almost no one expected. You see, when the document first spread, many assumed fiddleafox would retreat into silence or issue a carefully worded apology. That's what scandals on Twitter usually looked like. Statements crafted with public image in mind, trying to minimize damage, but fiddleafox's first response broke every expectation. Instead of denying the screenshots or claiming they were fabricated, she doubled down. Her opening line was as blunt as it gets. "Well, I guess Anubis leaked all over our Discord convos because I warned 2 people he was a massive creep." She then continued saying, "I may be a huge racist and trans misogynist, but at least I don't constantly talk about being tiny." It was a jaw-dropping moment. No long-winded justification, no PR language, just a direct admission. I may be a huge racist and trans misogynist. For those reading, it almost felt surreal. Self-cancellation in real time. Where most people would scramble to soften their words, fiddleafox stripped away all pretense, laying it bare with a tone so casual it bordered on mockery. She didn't stop there. In follow-up posts, she confirmed the screenshots were real. "Yes, those screen caps are all real. No, I'm not apologizing for what I said in private, LOL." Again, she wasn't trying to win back trust. She wasn't even attempting damage control. Instead, she treated the entire exposure like an inconvenience, brushing it off with sarcasm and even attempts at kink-shaming the person who leaked the messages. There was, however, one exception she tried to claw back on. She singled out that particular line, "Black people need to wear shock collars or they'll fly into a murder rage and rape your daughters." According to her, this wasn't a literal expression of hatred. It was, she claimed, a commentary on Zootopia. Her argument went like this. In the early drafts of the Disney film, predators were forced to wear shock collars as a stand-in for systemic oppression. She insisted that her Discord comment was mocking this lazy allegory, painting how offensive it was to equate minorities with dangerous animals. By her telling, the line had already been taken out of context, twisted into something she hadn't meant. But the explanation rang hollow. For one, her messages weren't confined to that single remark. The same day, she had openly said things like, "I hate black people," and "being around black people reminded me why Trump won." If the shot caller comment had really been nothing more than media criticism, why was it surrounded by such explicit racism? The attempt to tie it all back to Zootopia felt more like deflection than charity. She further argued that the leaker, a former acquaintance named Anubis, had deliberately cherry-picked her worst lines to destroy her reputation. She claimed she couldn't prove the full context because he had already removed her from Discord, leaving her without access to the broader conversations. "Feel free to think I'm lying. It makes no difference to me," she wrote. She was admitting guilt in one breath and insisting on misunderstanding in the next. Her clarification also slipped into another pattern, which was attacking the credibility of her accuser. She described Anubis as manipulative and untrustworthy, someone who had set her up by feeding her inflammatory material and waiting for her to react. In her framing, he wasn't just the messenger, he was the instigator, but then again, this did little to help her case. Even if her accuser was a creep, as she put it, her words were still hers. What the community saw was someone trying to thread an impossible needle, admitting fault without truly taking responsibility. Instead of remorse, there was defensiveness. Instead of an apology, there was simply blame shifting. For many, the clarification attempt sealed their view of her. The tone of her response told the community everything they needed to know. This wasn't an artist scrambling to save face. This was an artist who didn't care. She wasn't sorry for the remarks themselves. She was only sorry the comments had gotten out. For many, that cemented their disgust. Fiddleafox wasn't just a bigot in private. She was brazenly unapologetic. One fan said that her lack of accountability was pathetic, and he wasn't wrong. By this point, the narrative had shifted. A month after the initial chaos, Fiddleafox returned with what she called a more thoughtful response. This time, it wasn't a quick-fire tweet storm, but a long Patreon post, written after she had gone silent and abandoned Twitter, and according to her, taken some time to reflect. Unlike her first reactions, which were defensive and defiant, this second response carried a tone of bitterness mixed with self-awareness. She opened by confirming what many had already suspected. She was alive, she was offline, and she had no intention of coming back to Twitter anytime soon. "Do not game yourself," she wrote, mocking the idea that people were still waiting for her return. In her words, stepping away from the internet was a relief. Twitter had become nothing but shallow validation, full of short-term gratification, and she admitted she hadn't enjoyed the art she was producing for months. But woven into this self-reflection was the same deflection that had plagued her earlier defenses. She doubled down on blaming Anubis, the person who leaked the Discord logs. She repeated again that he had manipulated her by feeding her inflammatory tweets, often from black users, just to provoke a reaction. According to her, he had set her up, knowing her temper would lead her into saying terrible things. So, in other words, yes, she had said racist and transphobic things, but she wouldn't have if she hadn't been baited. That line of reasoning fell flat for many. These were her words, her decisions. Blaming the person who leaked them felt like trying to outsource accountability. Still buried within the bitterness, there were glimpses of something more human. She admitted she was in therapy, trying to understand her own shortcomings. She claimed to be learning new skills, working on a passion project she hoped to share one day. She spoke about the death threats and harassment she received in the wake of the scandal, which, while not excusing her words, added another layer to the fallout. She seemed to acknowledge, at least in part, that she needed to change. And yet the apology, if you could even call it that, was tangled in contradictions. She said she was sorry for letting her anger turn into racist thinking, but she also insisted she didn't care if people believed her. She admitted her words were indefensible, but she also argued they were cherry-picked and lacked context. She claimed she wanted to grow, but she spent just as much time tearing down the people who had exposed her. For her supporters, this second response was a glimmer of hope. Maybe she really was trying to better herself. For others, it was too little too late. Therapy and self-improvement didn't erase years of hateful messages. The truth sat somewhere in the middle. Fiddleafox was clearly shaken, humbled by losing her platform and reputation. Whatever the case, it marked the end of her public presence. After this Patreon post, Fiddleafox slipped almost entirely into obscurity. The art remained, but the artist was gone. And for many, that was the only form of accountability they would ever get. The once bustling Twitter feed of nearly 30,000 followers went dark. No new posts, no new art, no return to the spotlight. For a fandom used to constant activity, this absence was clear. But then again, why would she even bother to come back? Within days of the leaks, her reputation imploded. Mutuals unfollowed, friends cut ties, and her name became shorthand for betrayal in the furry community. Even those who had admired her work were forced to confront the reality that the artist behind the cute fox drawings harbored deep, hateful views. Fiddleafox kept her word, as she has not posted on Twitter since as she's promised. Her last post on the platform was the Patreon statement on the 28th of August, 2021. To some, continuing to support her was equivalent to condoning racism and transphobia. That debate about art versus artist raged across comment sections and forums long after she disappeared. But the controversy also revealed something unsettling. Not everyone turned away. Her Patreon numbers, which had hovered at a modest 12 supporters before the leaks, suddenly spiked to 31 in the days after the scandal. Many of these were new followers, some clearly edgy fans drawn in by the drama, others curious onlookers who wanted to see what she would do next. The count eventually settled around 27, but the damage was clear. Infamy had translated into money. Even as the community condemned her, controversy gave her a brief financial bump. Meanwhile, commentary creators and internet personalities seized on the drama. Videos dissecting her racist Discord messages, mocking her Zootopia defense, and condemning her excuses spread across YouTube and Twitter. Some offered fair analysis, others simply cashed in on outrage. For every thoughtful take on accountability, there were rushed hot takes, rehashed scripts, and endless dunking. The scandal became content, and in that sense, her downfall was recycled into entertainment for people far removed from the original community. Yet behind the noise, what lingered most was absence. The fandom never saw her passion project that she had promised while in therapy. Her account stayed dormant. Her name faded into trending tags, only reappearing in passing when new controversies brought the debate of separating art from the artist back into focus. Her silence was also some kind of strategy. With no new statements, there were no fresh controversies, no new fuel for outrage. The reaction from fans and supporters was also a mixed bag. Some wanted her back and kept calling her to make a triumphant return, especially after the Trump-led victory. Others went against the grain. Instead of condemning, they embraced some of her most brazen comments about black people in shock collars, saying she was so based for that. In the end, the fallout was less about Fiddleafox herself and more about the community she left behind. Another thing was that the collapse of Fiddleafox's reputation didn't just end her career, it split the fandom down the middle. This clash exposed deeper fault lines in the furry community. For marginalized members, especially black and trans furries, the revelation stung as proof that people were willing to overlook bigotry as long as the art looked cute. For defenders, it framed as a fight against mob justice, a refusal to let moral outrage dictate creative enjoyment. If the Fiddleafox scandal revealed anything, it was less about one artist's collapse and more about how the internet feeds on collapse itself. The moment her Discord messages leaked, the reaction followed a script that has played out countless times before. Destructive criticism became the first wave. Screenshots circulated alongside insults, memes, and dunk tweets. She wasn't just called out, she was mocked, dragged, and buried under a pile of sarcastic replies. Many insisted she deserved all the hate, treating ridicule as justice, filling her comment section with loads of hate and insults. The piling on blurred the line between holding someone accountable and simply reveling in cruelty. For critics, she was finished. For trolls, she was just another target to kick while down. The scandal also attracted self-promotion and clout chasing. In the replies to call-out threads, artists dropped their portfolios and commission links, using the moment as a chance to poach followers. To onlookers, it came off as hollow and opportunistic, profiting off outrage while pretending to take a moral stance. It was like corporations slapping rainbows on logos during Pride Month while doing little to support gay people in practice. The effect was disingenuous, brand-damaging, and, ironically, only made the discourse messier. All of this turned Fiddleafox's downfall into something bigger than her. It stopped being about one's artist's racism and transphobia and became a meta-story about internet culture itself, how scandals ignite, how communities fracture, and how outrage turns into spectacle. She was both a subject and a prop, an individual whose actions set off a chain reaction that revealed more about the ecosystem of online accountability than about her own attempts to defend herself. In the end, the scandal was no longer just the fiddleafox situation. It was a case study in how the internet reacts when someone falls. A cycle of destructive criticism, formulaic commentary, opportunistic self-promotion, and endless debate over what accountability should look like. Her story became less about fiddleafox and more about us, the audience, and the ways we consume and weaponize controversy.